I am recording the session so that the link to the recording can be shared with those students that are not able to attend the session, and then they have the option to then view the recording afterwards. So without further ado, welcome to our session this morning. And I have muted you, and I've not muted your mics. I've disabled your cameras. But if there's a problem, because I'm working on two different screens, so Hannah, I'm just going to ask that if something goes wrong or you pick up a problem on either the audio or the video, you just unmute yourself and just tell me, listen, there's a problem, pause quickly, here's a challenge, so that I don't proceed, because I'm not going to be seeing if there are hands raised for questions. So I'm going to ask you to be my eyes in the background, so Hannah, please. And then if there are questions, we will take questions. There's going to be a place in the presentation where I'm going to stop so that we can discuss something, because I want to invite your thoughts on specific things. And then right at the end, we will then also take questions from the floor, so that I can be sure that I've addressed your most pressing needs. So thank you very much. I'm just going to close there, and I'm just going to activate this, and then we can start. So very welcome this morning. The layout of our class this day is specifically on case studies. But before I talk about case studies and why case studies are used, it is very important that we consider the space of case studies within the context of assessment, because in a university space, we are expected to use different forms of assessments or tests, is the old term, to determine whether students understand what we are doing. Then we will look at the different levels of assessment practices used in first year, second year, third year, and upward. Finally, we will then touch on assessment in the online space, and we will talk a little bit about why it's important to protect the legitimacy of the process in the interests of our qualifications. Every 3 to 5 years, the Council of Higher Education require universities to evaluate what they are doing against what they said they will be doing. And then what we do at each step is evaluated by external reviewers from industry and the higher education spaces. So as lecturers, we must then provide evidence of what we are doing, and what we are doing has to be aligned with what we said we are going to do at first year, second year, third year, honours, masters, and PhD. We will talk a little bit about the NQF levels, Bloom's taxonomy, and then the verifiable and authentic assessment practices in an online space. So this sounds, yeah, what has this got to do with case studies? But it's important to understand assessment practices. From our first encounter at primary school, we have been subjected to assessment in one form or another. And at the very lowest level, earliest level, small children get to identify colors or numbers or animals. And then later they're asked to combine colors, the primary colors, to make other colors, or to add, subtract, multiply, and divide numbers in an increasing trajectory of difficulty and complexity. Now, these assessment practices grow increasingly challenging from grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, all the way through to grade 12. The higher the level of your tertiary step, the more complex and challenging your assessment is. Now, in the UNISA space, the lecturers are guided in terms of our assessment policy, designed by UNISA and aligned with best practice guidelines, as well as other guidelines issued by the Department of Higher Education and Training. So in other words, there is a standard benchmark, for lack of a better word, that higher education have placed there, that all universities and tertiary institutions at higher education level have to comply with. And then our assessment policy, and based on this assessment policy, I have to do what I do within the framework of this assessment policy. Now, pass rates. After every semester, the pass rate for that specific module is evaluated against historic information. Now, if there's a drop, then we as lecturers are expected to explain why the pass rate dropped. Sometimes, and I think for the most part, I'm unable to pinpoint the reasons why the pass rate has dropped. I can only speculate why the pass rate has dropped, and because I don't have a physical control over what you as students are doing. So only students can actually answer this question. But sometimes what I found that does contribute to this, and when students simply, they don't read the questions carefully, and therefore they simply don't answer the question asked, or especially in the open space, when it's an open book exam, they copy directly from the source without referencing or without giving their own analyses. Or what we are increasingly finding, they are either using assignment molds where people do the assignments for them, or they are using AI-generated text like ChatGPT to answer their questions. Now, there are some things I have control over, but there are some things I have absolutely no control over. And for example, to what extent students prepare for an open book exam, but let's talk about that when we talk about the case studies. So pass rates, what do they say? It's a difficult question to answer, because if I have 100% pass rate, what could it mean? If I have a 40% pass rate, what could it mean? If I have a 60% pass rate, what could it mean? Those things are very fluid and may be very sensitive to current contexts. For example, when COVID hit in 2020, we had to go immediately into online exams, and it was not simple for us or the students, and this was a difficult context to navigate. We have now instituted proctoring tools, which is like your Invigilator app or your Moodle proctoring or your Iris. And there are different ways to proctor or to evaluate the legitimacy and true reflection of the students' work that they submit for the exams. So in our context, we are guided by the Department of Higher Education's NQF levels. This is basically the National Qualifications Framework levels. This means that all qualifications in South Africa in the various NQF levels have to be designed to meet the requirements of each of these levels. And the assessment and outcomes have to be aligned with each of these levels. So what I have on the image is just from NQF 1, 2, 3, 4, which is your lowest level. You have NQF level 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, which is at a postgrad university level. So what does it look like? So let's take the BA in Forensic Science and Technology as an example. So first year modules, that's all at the NQF level 5. And your module code will begin with 15 something something. So your second year level is NQF 6. So that code will begin with 26 something something. And your third year modules are at NQF 7. So they will begin with FOR37 something something. So my one first year module is the investigation of selected crimes and transgressions. It is FOR1502. And then I have a third year module, which is forensic methods and techniques, module A, and it is FOR3701. So that helps you also to explain that. A little bit of useless information, but it gives you just context of the different levels and how they scaffold. So now that we have a clearer understanding of the different levels of the qualifications per year, I want to briefly touch on what we as academics are guided by in the education space, and it is known as Bloom's taxonomy, and it goes also according to levels. These levels range from the most basic, which is at the bottom: remember, recall, recognize, list, describe, retrieve, name, and find, to the most advanced level, which is usually at your PhD level, and it's create to generate new ideas or products or ways of viewing things. So let's quickly unpack each of them. So at your first year level, it's usually questions like how many people do you see in the image? What is the name of the man in blue? Can you name the crime being committed? So you would be asked true and false questions. You would be asked multiple choice questions at a basic level. You would be given an image and you would say, identify the person on the left or identify the person on the right. So it's just at a very elementary or basic level. These questions, this type of question is usually asked primarily at first year and second year level, a little bit less at the second year level, but more so at the first year level. Our second level is understanding questions. So can you write in your own words? How would you explain? Can you write a brief outline? What is the main idea? Can you illustrate or explain? So first year, a little bit. Second year, definitely, and sometimes a little bit at third year. You would have had this question. You would have had to explain what is modus operandi in your own words. So you can see that's not a very high level of thinking, but you need to be able to clarify it in your own words. The next one is application, where you would be asked questions based on information. So there may be one or two of these at a first year level, but there shouldn't be very many. Definitely at second year level, and most certainly at third year level, you would be exposed to this type of question. For example, let's look at what questions would you ask of. So if we have a case study, you could say, what questions could you ask the suspect pertaining to his movement in the vicinity where he was seen? So something in terms of application of information or even principles. Then analysis. This is at an NQF level 4. Sometimes maybe a few of these questions at a second year level, but definitely a third year. So in third year level, you would have analysis. So you would be given a case study and you would be asked to explain what do you see in the case study in terms of, let's say, surveillance. Would surveillance be a good technique to address the ABC problem? Or what is the problem identified or being discussed in the case study that you could see? And then using the case study information, you need to answer those questions. So that's at level 4. It's a little bit more difficult. Then you would have questions at NQF level 5. Not NQF level 5, sorry, Bloom's taxonomy level 5. These are sometimes a little bit third year, but definitely honors and going into masters. And then you would have the last one, which is Bloom's Taxonomy NQF level 6, definitely at PhD level, where you are expected to design something, come up with something new, something novel, something which has not been done before. Why is it necessary to scaffold or to design our assessments like this? So in simple terms, because if you have a structure, for example, like a house, it is only as strong as the foundation on which it's built. So let's take the first year, second year, third year modules in a qualification. If the foundational knowledge is missing, or there are elements that are incomplete, then the remaining knowledge will have similar gaps, because our qualifications are designed that the knowledge you get at first year, you build on second year, and you build on third year. And this is also one of the reasons why cheating is so counterproductive, because if you cheat on, let's say, a first year module, and you don't internalize specific knowledge or elements in that module, when you get to third year or even honors level, you cannot fall back on that knowledge because you don't have the knowledge. So in the image I've given you, this is what happens on the left-hand side if you skip steps. But on the right-hand side, if you don't skip steps, if you go step by step and you build on, this is what happens. On the left-hand side, this is what happens if you skip steps. You will not get to where you are wanting to go, and some people simply then just there's a lack of success at the end of the day. So it is important that whatever we do in terms of assessment, the lecturer and the student, is that we don't skip steps. It's as simple as and as complex as that. So let's get to the case studies, what they are and why they are important. And this is where I want to pause for a moment. And I'm now going to invite your views. I'm going to ask that you raise your hand, perhaps, and we discuss these two questions for a brief moment. Let's first of all take the question, what is a case study? Just your views or your opinions. If you don't want to answer live, you are more than welcome to pop your answer into the chat. Otherwise, just raise your hand and then I will acknowledge you, and then we will listen to what you say. And there's not a right and wrong. This is just so that we can share our views and our opinions on what it is that we are working with and talking about, so that we are all sure we are on the same page. Okay, anybody with an opinion? Any hand? Some of you may have heard the term a scenario as well. Some people use the term scenario instead of a case study. Okay, so here is an answer in the chat box. Scenario involves the concepts that we learned. Absolutely. Absolutely. Some other views? Thinking back on the previous, the semester that's just gone past, assignment 1, assignment 2, you had case studies there. What did these case studies make you think of when you read the case study? What does it remind you of? I see somebody's typing. It's okay if you don't feel comfortable to answer directly, but I really want to encourage you to share your views. So There's another answer, application of concepts, theories and laws. Yes, they are hidden in the case study, hidden in inverted commas in the case study. Okay, I'm going to give one more moment for any other view or opinion or even thought on what a case study or a scenario is. Okay, there's nothing else. Okay, let's move to the next question. Why do you think I use case studies in assessment? Why do you think, and is it important? Why is a case study important? Let's take this last case study we've had. I hope everybody has 3701 because I invited a lot of students. So why is a case study important? I see we have somebody still writing, giving me some insight and some answers. It tests your understanding. Yes, your understanding of what is my question now. Remember, we spoke about scaffolding. You are now at third year. You are now at third year. There should be foundational understanding. You've gone through first year, you've gone through second year, you are now at third year. When you complete this qualification, you will become a graduate. So it tests your understanding of what you have learned in the module. So let's take FOR 3701, for example. In FOR 3701, we deal with 5 specific themes or chapters or little sections. So while we have another student that's busy typing, so we dealt with cell phone technology, and in that we dealt with the Locard principle and we dealt with the Lochner principle, and there is still major confusion between those two. Then we dealt with modus operandi and trademarks. We dealt with surveillance and pointing out. We dealt with polygraphs, and we dealt with managing a unit or a section, and the role of LCRC and the Forensic Science Lab. So primarily in FOR 3701, my assessment revolves around those themes. I see we still have somebody busy answering, so I'm just going to give a moment so that they can finish typing. So if I can take the answers that have come from the floor, that a case study is like a scenario or a story that contains concepts and theories, and it's designed to evaluate or test your understanding. It helps to understand things better by connecting real life situations with what we have learned. Absolutely. And that is why it's important that the case studies or the scenarios that we write or we give to our students can relate to. And that's why I use cash and transit heists in this last one, because it's current, and almost not a day goes by that we are not faced with or hear about. And some of us even drive past these crime scenes where there's a CIT heist in process, or it has just happened. So it's something that is an absolute reality in our daily life. So, okay, I think we all are now a little bit more familiar with what is a case study or a scenario, and why a case study is important, provided, of course, it's connected with a real life situation. So it must be something that you can identify with And that is why I try and write my case studies as inclusive as possible. I see somebody is still trying to write something, but okay, let's proceed with the next slide. So what is important about case studies is it has to be context specific. As I mentioned, so in FOR3701, I designed a case study about a cash in transit heist, simply because it's current in our criminal context, and you may be expected one day to deal with such an investigation, whether as an internal investigator, where somebody inside a company may be involved, or even as a forensic investigator in an external space or within law enforcement. And then once I've given you the case study, I have designed it so that I can measure your understanding of specific principles and theories and the application thereof in an unfamiliar context. Because now you must be able to take what you have learned about the low card principle, the touch theory, where two items, physical items, touch each other, they leave trace evidence of each other on each other. That is the low card principle. Now you must be able to, based on the case study, be able to tell me where in the case study would you be able to use the low card principle for a specific purpose. So in other words, it's not just a theory, but you have to understand what you can do with the theory. And then you need to answer your question based on those questions. Okay, so let's look at assignment 1 of the first semester. And I must say, one of the challenges I experienced with assignment 1 is that students misunderstood the 2 examples I gave as two different incidents. And they talked about the 2 incidents. They were actually 2 newspaper reports about the same incident. And then the students, some of them, simply misread and misunderstood and did not contextualize what was going on. So let's quickly read the case study. The South African National Parks is under fire after centuries-old gold artifacts were stolen from one of its museums. So what we are dealing with is a theft from a museum, not a fire at a museum, but a theft from a museum. The artifacts include a necklace, bracelets, and beads excavated from 2 graves at the Tulamela archaeological site in Kruger National Park, which was inhabited between the 13th and 14th century. And then it goes on to explain Mapungubwe. So some of the students mistook the excavation and the archaeological site as there were bodies and there were graves and there were two skeletons, and they went on all sorts of very, very interesting routes, but it is not relevant to the case study because the artifacts which were housed in the museum were stolen. Okay, the artifacts were stolen last December from the Stevenson Hamilton Knowledge Resource Center at Skukuza. And then Cyan Tylee now is quoted as saying gold artifacts are an extreme rarity, and that's why the Tulamela theft is a travesty. So she has got nothing to do with the theft. She just gave her opinion because she is the curator of the Mapungubwe collection at the University of Pretoria. The artifacts were stolen in December, and some students took it to mean that because there were 2 reports, there were 2 incidents, and they both occurred in December, which is incorrect. And this highlights for me a foundational skill in some of the students' skill set is of reading for understanding. Because if you cannot read for understanding you will misinterpret that South African national parks is under fire, which means they are in trouble. People are shooting comments at them. You are in the hot seat. You are getting flack. You are getting problems and trouble. It doesn't mean that there was a fire. Nobody burnt the place down. The artifacts that were excavated from 2 graves, the artifacts is the necklace, the bracelets, and the beads. There were graves, but there were no bodies, so there's no bones, so there's nothing to come and identify, because it's already been identified by the archaeologists, and the curator knows what's going on there. So these are some of the misconceptions that came in terms of questions that were answered. So let's take a look at a question based on the case study. So based on this case study, the question is, using the same scenario you used for question 4.2, identify which specialized crime scene specialists, and I'm telling you where to find them, discussed in Learning Unit 5, you would call to the scene. So now you must use the story, the theft at the museum, and you must identify the crime scene specialists mentioned in Learning Unit 5 that you would call to the scene. So if you say A, B, C, and D, now you must motivate your answer. Now, based on the case study, some of the students really did well here. Some of them did not do so well. But based on your study guide also, Learning Unit 5 tells you that the LCRC may only get involved when there is a criminal case that has been registered with the South African Police Service. So that should be your foundational starting point. So it's recommended that once a case has been registered with SAPS, the services of the local criminal records center should be used. The LCRC, who are they? They are tasked with providing scientific services to detectives and to process crime scenes for evidence left behind by perpetrators of the crime. So now you are telling me who they are, what they do, and when may they be used. Now, it is strongly recommended, because how do you know what to tell the LCRC? How does one know when must they start looking? So go to the CCTV or the surveillance footage and identify the specific day, date, and time when the crime occurred, because it says last December. I know the other report gave a date when the theft was discovered, but that is not the date of the theft necessarily. It has to be the date. You have to go back and look, when did this occur? Now, this can be obtained from the manager, who was the last person to see the artifacts in the display case. It will provide a time frame to use when you're looking through the video footage. The video footage can then be viewed to pinpoint the exact day, date, and time when the burglary occurred. Once this has been done, the access records of the entry gate can be retrieved, showing the vehicle, registration details, particulars of the visitors. Remember, when you go into a national park, you have to register. They take down your car's registration details. You have to show your ID or your passport. This gets written into a register. So you cannot just simply provide them with a false name. You have to provide your actual ID book or your passport. Yes, it's possible that people have false identity documents, but at least you would have something to start on. You had have some information in terms of facial images, what the car looked like if it was a false registration. So the video footage also in the museum will show how access was gained to the display cases. There's speculation that there was inside involvement because the display cases were locked when the curator found that these items were gone. And using this footage, the people from LCRC can be guided on where to search for clues, such as imprint and other evidence. The LCRC are also able to search for previously convictions of suspects once a suspect has been identified through a fingerprint or other means. And they also help to interpret information at crime scenes like blood spatter analysis, foot imprints, and the like. So who do we get? We get print experts. These experts search for any form of prints on the display cases, if there are visible footprints or tool mark impressions. These can also be captured. A photographer or a videography, this is vital to record the scene and take as many pictures as you can. These experts take photos of identifiable prints, footprints, and other imprints. They also capture the scene as it was found after the theft was discovered. They also need to search for other evidence that may be at the scene, such as perhaps blood or saliva, disposed cigarette butts, and all of these may produce valuable DNA or even non-DNA evidence that can assist in linking a suspect to the scene. Sketch artists. Now, these experts are vital to reconstruct images of the stolen items if there were no photos available of these items, because not in all instances do places where there was a theft or a burglary have an identifiable photograph of the items that were stolen. Then a sketch artist will be able to help with that. While the video footage of the suspects may also be available, sketch artists can then help to draw images not sufficiently captured by the video, for example, tattoos or scars or emblems displayed on a car, like an entry disc on the window for a specific, let's say, residential property, or a university even. So there are things inside the images that the sketch artist would be able to assist with. And then whatever you say, you have to link to the case study. Sorry. So if we look at the case study, everything you answer must be linked to the gold artifacts stolen from one of the cases, the necklace, the bracelets, to get images of them, to get images of the suspects that visited the scene. And you don't need LCRC to get the surveillance footage. LCRC are those specialists who have tools and technology to access the evidence that is not always clearly visible with the naked eye. So they have like sprays, and they have blue lights, and they have different colored lights and powders, and they can actually from fingerprints also capture touch DNA, and thereby linking an individual person, because you can use the DNA or the fingerprint to identify an individual and link an individual to the case. What you could also do, and what you should also do, is to take everybody's fingerprints who had access to the museum for exclusionary purposes, so that if you were to find their fingerprints on or near the display cases, and they are supposed to be there, then you don't have to immediately flag them as a suspect. There are other ways of doing that. So I hope that gives you a little bit better insight into using a case study to answer a question that is asked. And then for case studies, for example, for this one, you don't have to give a reference, because your reflection is based on the case study. But if I was to ask you, provide your own explanation of what modus operandi is, you must give a reference, because you did not think up the definition of modus operandi. You read it somewhere. So then you have to reference where you read it. And even if it's a study guide, that's fine, but it has to be in your own words. So the case study is then the lens that you use to answer the theory or the principle related question. And whatever you answer, you must relate back to the information in the case study. So in this past assignment, a lot of people just simply, when we spoke about the Lochner principle, a lot of students just simply gave me that bullet list of what a cell phone analyst can get from cell phone records. And that says nothing. It is not linked in any manner or form to the case study, and therefore you do poorly and you don't get the results you think you should be getting, because I worked so hard, except you didn't, because you didn't apply your mind, you didn't think. And now I'm generalizing. There are some students who did really, really well in assignment 2, and their marks reflected it. Some did not do so well. They passed, but they could have done better had they just referenced where they were supposed to reference. And others did very, very poorly because they either misread the question, misunderstood the question, or went on a track that I don't know where they got the idea from. Then we had some instances of use of ChatGPT to answer questions. Those students were identified and they have been warned. Please take note, and we will discuss this when we do our preparation for the exam session, that your submission platform has a feature that identifies AI-generated text, and it flags it for us, and we interrogate those scripts for such cheating, and also for scripts that are the same. So in other words, if let's say Suhana and I decide we're going to work together, she's going to do question 1, I'm going to do question 2, she's going to do question 3, I'm going to do question 4, and then we just share our answers and submit the same assignments or answers in the exam. The system is going to pick that up, and you will be flagged for disciplinary steps. So please don't gamble with your own academic career. You are at 3rd year. You are busy finishing. Don't let this be a misstep. Be ethical. Get ready. We will talk about in the exam prep session of how does one prepare for an open book exam. But for now, I just wanted to demystify and clarify case studies and what they are and why we use them. Okay, so now it's time for questions overall. Questions from the floor, questions that you've been wondering about case studies, and some of you might not be here as an FOR3701 student, but as a student from another module where case studies or scenarios are used. Please feel free to ask me if you have a application related question in terms of case study use and how to best answer case studies. Then I will take your questions, but I cannot help with specific answers to modules that are not mine. Yeah, so this you will have to follow up with your specific lecturer. We have asked for the release of tutorial letter 202, which contains the recommended answers to assessment 2 for FOR3701. So please monitor your module sites for when it is released. Okay, and now I want to ask, what questions do you have? What are you wondering about? I want to emphasize we will have a planning for exams preparation session in which we look at some strategies to plan for an open book exam. Open book exams are not easy exams. I've done several open book exams, and my hardest hit one was when I did my honors and I did project management, and I simply couldn't finish the exam paper. There was just too much. And I mean, I flagged and I tagged and I noted and I had everything with me. But those were in the good old days when everything was still done by hand. So yeah, they some of the experience, and we will talk about that in our exam prep class. Okay, questions from the floor. If you don't feel that you can ask a question, please pop a question or a comment into the chat box. While you're thinking, I want to also take this opportunity to ask you the case study that I used for assignment 2 for FOR3701. I have given you the reason why I used that type of case study, but now I need to hear from you whether that case study hit the mark, whether you were able to identify with the case study, with the type of crime, with the context. If you say yes, then that's fine. If you say no, please tell me where can I improve? What can I change? What can I amend? So that when I redesign or I go into the next semester, I improve on those elements. If you do not tell me where I am missing it, I won't know. And that is why I invite your comment. Okay, any comments, any questions? I don't see comments, I don't see questions. I will be sharing the copy of the PowerPoint afterwards via the module site. I see on one of the other platforms there is a problem with the module site at the moment. It seems that the system is acting up again. So for now, I will be sharing it via the Telegram groups. So please feel free to share both the presentation and the link to the recording. The recording will also be captured on my YouTube channel, which is Never Down. So you are all more than welcome to then access the recordings there. If there are no further questions, I want to thank you, each one of you, very, very much for joining our session. I really hope that you found it valuable and insightful and that you learned something. And even afterwards, if you have a suggestion or a comment or a recommendation, I'm going to pop my email address here into the chat box. And I'm responsible for these modules, 3701 and FOR5907. So if you have a comment or a suggestion or a recommendation in terms of today's class or any other of my classes that you attended that you feel think about this, think about that, please do pop me an email with your feedback, with your engagement. I can then improve what I do. Thank you for all your assistance and being actively involved with us. It is my immense pleasure. At the end of the day, your success is my success, but I can take you to water, but I can't make you drink. So I can present as far as possible, but I cannot make you learn and do things in the correct way. Only you can do that. So let's make sure that we prepare well for the upcoming exam. In next week, we will have our exam prep session, and hopefully we will have more in attendance. I'm going to pause for one moment because I see we have somebody typing something, and I don't want to dismiss us before I have that comment, so that we can all be aware of. Okay, Unati, your comment seems to have disappeared. Okay, all right. Unati says, thank you, Prof. It is my immense pleasure. Okay, I'm going to end the recording, and then I shall share the recording on the Telegram group.